Hey, I'm Jessica Oglesby. I'm Coleman's wife, Jackson, Kendall, and Corey's mama, and y'all are in my house, and I'm going to tell you a little bit of my story. So at 9, I remember moving to Tampa, Florida. My mother was in an abusive relationship, so my aunt told us that God told her to come and fix the situation and move her nieces and her sister down to Florida to get out of that situation. Well, we got to Florida and so forth, and there began my relationship with Fix It Jesus. My grandmother got sick, and my mother was in a horrific car accident, and life continued to happen. And so whenever we prayed or we talked about Christ, it was always from a standpoint of he's going to fix this situation for us. Well, my grandmother ended up dying because of my mother's accident. She became she was already codependent, but she became dependent on narcotics for pain purposes, but eventually later on down the road led to illegal use of other such things. At some point, we ended up moving back to Atlanta. I started high school, started college. I wasn't ready for college, and Georgia State put me out. After getting that letter, I remember going to church that night. We had a church home. I think at this point, I'd probably gone down front asking to rededicate my life probably 2 or 3 times. But this particular time, after I got the expulsion letter, it was like, okay, I really got to get this worked out. So we're going to try to fix it. I'm going to talk to Jesus again, and he's going to fix the situation for me. Well, it didn't get fixed. And so needless to say, I didn't go back to Georgia State. But that night, I did meet my husband. And we started dating. We were at a lovely little establishment where there were ladies without clothes on dancing. I was not working. Let me say that. So he and I met. That was on a Wednesday night in June of 2002. By March of 2003, I was pregnant. And so by at the end of 2004, we got married. And the soon-to-be 1-year-old was at the wedding, so you can kind of guess how that went. But at that point, I knew with a husband and a son and just the family I grew up in, never having seen marriage modeled at all in a healthy way, let alone with the gospel at all, I knew that I needed Jesus, and I knew I needed him close by. So that started the relationship with Stand By Jesus. So at that point, Coleman and I started going to church together. I started to serve, and then I would make it a point to, Cole, we need to give, we need to tithe, we need to fast, we need to go to conferences, we need to do everything we can, because at this point, we just needed Jesus to do for us. In 2010, our church crashed, and that was a rock of our faith. That was a rock of my faith, rather. And so at that point, Coleman and I really took a good 2 years off from church. In those 2 years, Coleman and I took the time out to just get to the scriptures ourselves and say, what does the Bible say about who Jesus is? Because just from my life, I know he wasn't Mr. Fix-It. He wasn't Mr. Clean, that was for sure. He wasn't on standby because he's always been there. And he wasn't just gonna do it because we could prompt him to. That was a hard lesson for me, was that I can't just make him do anything I want him to do. So during that time, Corey and I visited a couple of churches. And at some point we came to Blueprint. I'll say about 2 or 3 weeks ago, we're riding in the car, get this phone call, hey, we want to come to your house and talk to you about how you came to know the Lord. I'm like, oh, okay, great. So I remember being in the car, and Coleman says, I'm driving actually, and he says, so babe, yeah, I really hadn't seen fruit from you till about 2 years ago. So wait. As many times as I walked down front and said, Lord, I'll do your will. So was that all in vain? Was it all for nothing? Was it real? Did it take? And so then it was, in the back of my head, I hear my grandmother saying, baby, you're going to lose your salvation. It was like, well, did I ever really accept salvation? You know, now that I think about it. So I think that was the conclusion I had drawn, and I was convincing myself and telling myself that I wasn't prepared to do the work. I wasn't prepared to walk the walk and talk the talk. Again, because I think that just whole compartmentalizing God and putting him where I needed him, or pulling him out when I needed him, made a difference. And so I think at this point, that conversation with my husband, writing down 20 and him telling me that it was hard, but it was a reality check for me that you can walk down front as many times as you want. Someone can offer you this great gift, but until you really believe it, I think it's just null and void. And I think it really wasn't until 2 years ago, I don't remember when the light went on, but I guess at some point I just decided it's time to stop saying I was a believer and actually doing what it takes to present myself as such. So really learning to walk with the Lord and recognizing that the Savior that I thought I knew, or the Jesus I thought I knew, was only what Jesus could do, not just who he was. And so it's awesome now to know that where I am and who he is, he's always been there. He's always been here. And then even the last 33 years of my life, it wasn't in vain anymore. So like the church crash had a purpose. The relationships falling apart had a purpose. My mother's relapse had a purpose. And so now, so I didn't understand sovereignty until I realized that everything before now mattered. And so any shame that may have came with the life I lived before, I see now that it served a purpose. It has a purpose. I can share those past experiences with people I come in contact with. I can share with my kids, you know, this is how mommy and daddy met. But you know what? It was for his grace that he kept me through those times. It was grace and patience that he gave me when I had to take my mom on her 5th extent to treatment. It was the same faith that I used when my grandmother passed away. It was the same faith that I had to tap into when our church fell apart. And at the time I didn't know what it was, but now I understand it was still his grace that was there, and that it all mattered, and everything I've gone through, it all makes sense now. But the good thing is, where I am now is at a place of my life is meant to be a reflection of him. Not just a believer, but actually living it and walking it and not being afraid of the challenges, but sharing the gospel with people and completely leaving just out of it.